All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Welcome to Season 4 of Where Am I to Go podcast. We've got some new things happening this season, and I just wanted to start off the season by kind of doing a review of the past seasons and talk about some of the things that are happening this year and some of the ways that maybe we are changing some things are getting better, and we're probably going to be doing things maybe a little bit different. First off, I cannot believe that we now have 95 episodes under our belt. That means that we have visited 95 museums and we're able to get podcasts at that many. The thing that's kind of amazing is there's probably another 50 to 75 museums that we have been to or places that we've been to that I have not been able to get a podcast at for different reasons. Sometimes my time frame is too short. I am not able to get a hold of the people I need to get a hold of when we are coming through a town and just discovered a new museum. Other times the museums don't respond back because I think they're too big or maybe they've got too many things going on. But whatever the case is, we do hit a lot of museums that we are not able to make podcasts on. We've tried a couple of museums like the Music Museum, and there was another one, Biosphere 2, where we did a museum in review, which I think turned out okay, but it doesn't really give you a great overview of what the museum is. But we'll probably continue to do a couple of podcasts like that if we find a museum that is absolutely outstanding and it's one that I can't get a podcast at. The one thing that's kind of interesting is Steve, the editor, has managed to make a new cover for each season, a new picture to go along with the podcast. And this year, he has done an outstanding job. I really, really like what he's done with our cover photo for Season 4. It was taken at a museum called the Cloud Museum in California, and he has over 200 Model Ts and some other really cool stuff. And Steve was able to take a picture that Linda took there and was able to do a little bit of coloring and a little bit of photoshopping, I guess. Not tons, but a bit, and he made the cover absolutely fantastic. I love this new cover that we're getting. And another thing that we're going to do this year is we're not going to have the intro. We're going to go straight into the podcast and not have an intro that talks about what we're doing. So this is the podcast that you need to listen to if you want to hear some of what's happening or what has happened. Another thing that we have done is we just got a website up and running. It is at whereamitogo.com. And the website will give you a link to the latest podcasts, or 2 or 3. And then underneath that, if you scroll down below where the podcasts are, we have each state listed that we have a podcast in. And we have podcasts in about 17 states. Some we only have one in, some we have several. And if you go down and you're traveling through, let's say, Arizona, you can hit Arizona and all of the podcasts that we have done in Arizona will show up. There's also some podcasts that we have that aren't really area specific that we did with friends or something else that we talked about a lot of different things, but not really any specific area. It's not tied in with any state. Another thing that we did this last summer is we took our grandson on a trip and we ended up going back through Deer Lodge, Montana. We ended up going through Deer Lodge, Montana. And as we were traveling through Deer Lodge, we stopped off at the Prison Museum and the Deer Lodge Car Museum. Both of those were early podcasts that we did. And as we got out into the courtyard or the prison yard, after entering the museum, Linda said, "Why don't you turn on the podcast and listen to that as we go through?" And I said, "Well, that might be kind of interesting." And I was amazed at how much more the experience was enhanced by listening to the podcast as we went through. I mean, I did the podcast, I knew what I did, and we'd already been through and seen it, but we wanted to show Kenneth the prison because it's a really cool place. But as we listened to the podcast, it was like having our own tour guide again, and my attention was brought to a lot of things that I maybe wasn't paying close enough attention to because I was doing the podcast and looking at items and asking questions and trying to keep the podcast moving forward. And so my mind maybe wasn't as focused on some things as it should have been. And listening to the podcast as we went back through, I was able to pick up on a lot of things that nobody else that was at the museum was picking up on as we were walking through. In fact, there was a couple of young ladies that were kind of hanging back just enough that they could hear and listening to the tour as we went through. And I'm sure that they got more out of their experience also. Another thing is Linda and I, we've decided that we're going to slow down our travels a little bit. The way that we've always worked this in the past is, let's say we're taking a trip to Oregon. We take 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and we try to hit as many museums or cool places as we can. And as we do that, we're on kind of a rushed schedule. We end up staying one night in a place and then moving on and then moving on and then moving on. And we've decided that we're going to slow down our travel pace to where we don't try to make as many miles in as short a time as what we have been. So this winter we're down in southern Arizona, and we've managed to stay a couple weeks in every location that we've stayed, which kind of limits the amount of podcasts we can get put out because we're staying in one location versus trying to get 10 or 12 podcasts done on a single trip. And since I'm working, I have to work, save, trip, work, save, trip, and we've always done everything, like I said, on a fast-paced schedule. So what's going to probably happen is, as you've noticed this last year, we were a little bit more inconsistent with getting the podcasts out. Some of that was due to time crunches or scheduling or just being able to get things edited. And this year, we may not have as many podcasts, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to run several of the older podcasts as reruns and put them out every so often. It's now been 3 years, going on 4. We've got a lot of podcasts that we've put out, and a lot of times I don't remember what all was said or done in a podcast that was maybe 3 years old. The information, the history, and that kind of stuff is still important. It's still there. And so we're going to probably intersperse some of the older podcasts back in for a re-listen. If you don't like it, don't listen to it again. Wait for the next new one to come out. But you may enjoy the old podcast just as much as you did the first time listening to it again. It should be pretty easy to identify because we're at podcast number 95 right now. If it says podcast number 20, there you go. That's your answer as to whether it's a rerun or a new one. I really appreciate everybody listening to the podcast. I appreciate the museum curators and people that have hosted us and allowed us to interview them and to talk to them about their museums or their places of interest. I have really enjoyed the opportunity to visit these places and to talk to these people, and everybody has been just absolutely wonderful to talk with. I hope everybody continues to listen and you continue to enjoy. If you have any comments or questions, you can email us at whereamiToGo@gmail.com, and also check out our Facebook page at Where Am I to Go Podcast. We have pictures from all of the different museums that we go to. We're going to keep up on that and keep posting pictures and other things that are interesting. So, again, I appreciate you following us, and I hope everybody has an absolutely wonder-filled day.
Haul the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?